Oh, heavy background vocal layers treatment in pop world. We've talked a little bit about this before. I like this topic because I posted a bunch of stories the other day of songs that I worked on, and people were asking about some of the One Direction stuff and gang vocals. And I was remembering on some of those tracks that when doing lots and lots of layered background vocals, there's so many different ways to do it. And I like to think of them in different categories. Like gang vocals will be a certain type of sound and a certain aesthetic. Doubled, tripled, quadrupled background vocals will be a certain aesthetic. Multiple lead vocals or multiple lead vocals will be a certain aesthetic. And rather than thinking of them as just lead and background vocals, there's so many different ways to treat these things. Do you generally get, I mean, you don't do a lot of like big straight pop stuff, but presumably you've done lots of things with gang vocals and background vocals. Do you
yesterday? Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on those things, or treating background vocals, pop layered vocals?
Again, there's nothing that's always, but a lot of the time I'll get geeky just because we have 1 minute, and I'll just be like a little bit prescriptive here.
Let's go.
I cut a lot of like between 1 and 2K out of background vocals because that's where I like my lead vocal to sit. So I just think about where the lead's sitting, and I want to take out the opposite stuff. And I line up your consonants, line up your shit. I'll move a couple of things, but as a producer, as a vocal producer, I think line up your consonants, mute unnecessary breaths, so there's not a bunch of stacked, odd, out of time breaths. That's not pro. It's not cool. It's not indie. It's just not. It's just called sloppy. Just get rid of it. You don't need all of it. And glue them together somehow. Use some sort of saturator or a quick slap effect that adds a little bit of space, or like I use a limiter a lot, and I just try to bring them all together as a group. You want them to kind of sound precise and tight, but also a bit more ambiguous than the lead. So I'll
little multi-band compression can be nice for that too, or just sort of like makes it indistinct.
Yeah, because of phasing, really. It's actually doing like just kind of negative things. That's a good place for that. And also oversampling. Oversampling takes transients away from things. So I stopped using it on really direct sounding sounds like the lead vocal or drums, and not on the mix bus either, but I will on background vocals. It adds a little wateriness, washiness to it. Sometimes I'll do that to ambient keyboards. So oversampling is cool for that. Anything to obscure the transients just subtly, so they don't interact with the lead. That's my best. I'll like do some dynamic EQ on the top end, even down to like 4 or 5K on a shelf, just so it's out of the way of the lead, just enough where it's dancing just subtly below. You can sidechain the background vocal bus in this. You can key it right to the lead vocal. So when the lead vocal's in, the top is going down a little bit. So you can kind of glue them together to the lead in that way.
Thinking of the lead vocal, wherever the lead vocal speaks, which is one of those music terms, wherever you're hearing the note or the presence or the consonants of the lead vocal, play with removing that either dynamically or just with a shelf or whatever on the background vocals to help the lead pop out more is a nice technique.
Yeah. Someone's saying like having the lead consonant and cutting the consonants on the other ones. I don't like that from the backgrounds. I don't like that as much. Like I've noticed it in productions. I like, because I mix the acapella sometimes. Like I'll, after a bunch of broad strokes, I'll just mute all the instruments and mix the acapella. And you could hear that stuff. It's subtle. But if they're there, clip gain down and controlled and not as punchy,
just line them up
into them. Just line them up and fade into them a little bit. I think it's a better, more punchy approach. You have more control over the consistency of the backgrounds. I wouldn't cut them out. I think that sounds lame, honestly. When it's all mixed, when you're not relying on a limiter in your production rough, where you're kind of obscuring everything anyway, when there's a bit more transparency to the mix, you'll notice that stuff, and that doesn't sound cool.
Yeah, and also it's always song dependent too. So use your ears. The annoying answer. Yeah.